Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick, the finale of Luke Cage Season 1, Episode 13, You Know My Steez?
Yes.
Apparently
That
we
sounds
do.
right. Okay. Kim, Bibbs, Alonso. So fight.
Yeah. It all boils down to two guys who aren't from Harlem fighting over the fate of Harlem, which, is that a commentary?
No, it shouldn't be.
That strikes me as a little weird. Isn't it kind of odd that that's what it boils down to?
I'm with you because we've talked about this before, how weirdly convenient that two guys from Georgia happen to end up in these positions.
Yeah.
And we've talked before about how the hell did someone as crazy and unhinged as Diamondback rise to the top of this crime organization where he's clear, there's something wrong with him. He comes in, I don't know, maybe it's just the writing, where he just comes in and he acts like he's an established character, but he isn't. And we just have to figure this all out and just understand that.
And to be fair, he does exist in the comics, but he's not an important figure in the comics. He doesn't have the baggage of Dr. Doom.
He's not his brother in the comics, right?
I don't think so.
In
I could be wrong.
the
I think
early
they're friends.
early episodes when Shades breezes in and he's talking about Diamondback, there's this implied sense of, oh, Diamondback, shadowy figure, but
Yeah.
important and powerful. And then once we get to know him, it's like, no, you're a lunatic. And what relation have you had with these characters before? I don't even know.
It's very poorly handled, and it's a damn shame because ultimately this just boils down to a big fist fight. And it's not even that good a fist
And
fight.
it could have, it's based on a premise that could easily be explained, you know? Like, hey, I'm not my dad.
Yeah, it all boils down to just them fighting over their mom or whatever like that,
know,
which
and
I kind of like. You could have played with that, I think,
The
and I
stakes
think
just aren't there.
well,
though.
it could have
You
been
don't
really
logic your way
personal.
out of the fight with Diamondback.
I know, but it's just like, it's
They didn't even get to
not
like a.
like, you know, when we see Fisk and Daredevil, or we see Kilgrave and Jessica, where there's a lot of meaning and a lot of things steeped in there. It's just all sort of implied, and the premise that we have been given seems weak. Like, give me something that makes this more than some Daddy Loves You Better.
It's not just weak; it's actually like poorly dramatized. Like we only had like one flashback with them as kids, and it's this episode just before the fight.
Yes.
We don't see them together before the fall. And again, all those other characters, Kilgrave and Kingpin as villains, are very beautifully dramatized. We know where they're coming from. We know why they think they're right.
Even Cottonmouth.
Even Cottonmouth, even Mariah, they're all great.
No,
Diamondback is the
Mariah's
least interesting
Mariah's
villain.
a great villain, but she can't fight Luke Cage.
No,
so
it doesn't work.
I think that's the corner they sort of painted themselves into.
And I appreciate you want to have a big fight, but let's even ignore the backstory for a moment. It's kind of funny that it boils down to just a big street fight and everyone going, circling, you know? That's kind of funny. And Mariah giving an interview while the fight's going on in the background is kind of funny. But as a conclusion, as a dramatic conclusion to a series, which, you're right, people have commented on this, it doesn't have a lot of action in it. I would have wanted something bigger or with more stakes involved.
Well, I mean,
or,
when we talk on that note, remember at the end of Jessica Jones never had very good fight scenes, right?
Generally not. I think the
then
Luke Cage fight was cool.
But still, the finale, it had an emotional impact, and it delivered. You know, and it did mean something personally to the characters, and it did feel like something was resolved, or something at least came to a dramatic conclusion.
And again, the stakes were raised right at the end there, so it felt like a really big deal. A lot of this episode is falling action. A lot of this episode is, and then he punched out Diamondback. How did he win the fight? He hit harder and believed in himself, which I think is a crap way to finish a fight scene.
Well,
but,
we were saying before, power suit with a glowing thing on the back.
Glowy
Take out
thing!
the glowing thing on the back.
It's not even inconspicuous. It is fucking glowing.
But I think
And it's making noises.
What
Stop that!
what they wisely do, though, is they get rid of all that crap in the first half of the episode to leave us to the real meat of the matter, which is, can they pin Cottonmouth's murder on Mariah? They think they can. She's smarter than they are. Can Luke completely bury his past as Carl Lucas, or is that going to come back to haunt him? What is his future with Claire?
Right.
Like, this is the stuff that actually matters. And so the fight almost feels like, all right, we have to do this because we've been building to it, and because, this is a Marvel thing and we have to give you some action every so often. But the emotional stakes and the dramatic stakes of the show are really good and really interesting. And I cannot say enough about how much I love Mariah as a villain because, again, she thinks she's doing the right thing. She thinks that she is saving Harlem. She is, consolidating her personal power and lining her pockets to a certain extent, but not in the way that characters like Cottonmouth or Shades did, where it's just strictly this kind of, this crime game. She has genuine ambitions, and some of those ambitions will be good for some people. You know, but she's doing through a despicable way, and she is, you know, ruthless and conniving and, you know, not easily taken down because of her facade of respectability. And that is a fascinating combination of traits for a bad guy.
Before we move on from it completely, I just want to say I agree with you. All of that emotional stuff is in the second half of the episode. But if you're going to dedicate so much of the episode to the fight, and even if the fight's kind of thin, it's just something you have to do, I think you owe it to us in the last episode to make it a real knockdown. I think it made, that's my one comment.
The fight itself is disappointing.
Okay. Just last
comment. No argument there. We forgot to mention in 11 or 12 when the hostage crisis is going on. I think in Mariah's speech at the club beforehand, she makes a reference to, you know, some woman gets to strangle a guy because she claims he was controlling her mind.
He was though.
Yeah. Can't even take her story seriously. The tragedy of Jessica Jones just continues.
Yes.
We didn't talk about Candace or Zip at all.
No, we didn't.
Well,
I liked when which one, Zip is the one
Candace
who like
buys it in this episode, unfortunately.
Zip is the one who is
he puts on the sunglasses because he wants to be
the new
He takes
shade.
his job and he puts on the glasses. Was that your uniform? It's really weird.
Zip has ambition.
Not
He's
anymore, he
too
doesn't.
stupid for this game. He's
Sadly,
too
yes.
dumb.
Yeah.
And he pays the price easily.
He does. There's a bit at the end where like Luke Cage is like, "Oh, I didn't do anything. I'm not even gonna. I don't need a lawyer." And I kept remembering from like the Addams Family, they say a man who represents himself as a fool for his client, and as God is my witness, I am that fool. The entire message of Luke Cage is that you can't trust the system. Maybe you should get a lawyer, Luke. Why would you assume you shouldn't? That seems really
Please
weird.
call Daredevil or at least Foggy.
It's weirdly naive.
Foggy would do.
Foggy would do a better job. It's weirdly naive of Luke to trust the system after everything he's been through.
As a former cop, even, yeah.
As a former cop who was framed,
yeah.
you get a lawyer.
And it's funny, I actually wrote down in my notes, the system man, because like in the 60s, it was a thing where like you'd have a movie like Cool Hand Luke or whatever, or Easy Rider, or, you know, all kinds of films where the implicit underlying story was, you know, the system is corrupt, the system is broken, the system screws people over. And then that became kind of a cliche unto itself, and people sort of, you know, ignored it. But it's still a valid thing. I mean, maybe more now than ever, it's a valid argument that the system is corrupt and the system does favor the rich and the powerful, and you see that happening in this show on every level. And since you're a Netflix subscriber, presumably watching Luke Cage, go watch Ava DuVernay's new documentary 13th, which will really drive you nuts about how fucked up the system is. But no, I think that this is sort of reclaiming that notion of what was at some point became kind of a cliche into being no, totally valid, totally up to date and current.
Well, and even his whole speech is very much like the end of Grapes of Wrath. Wherever there's a cop beating up on a guy, there'll be someone who didn't stop caring.
Right.
Luke Cage has this big speech about stopping caring, and it's kind of overplayed a little bit. Like there are cops in the background who start like, this is a good one.
Don't you all have work to do?
Oh yeah, sorry. I just was really inspiring. It's really inspiring.
It's a good speech.
It's
though.
a good speech.
And
It kind of earns it. It's a bit much, but I think it works.
Yeah, because I think the thing is, you can, if you're going to make a show that's about how the system is fucked up, then that invites accusations of cynicism, or invites the idea that you're promoting cynicism to your audience. And he's saying no, like the fact that the system is fucked up means that we have to fight all the harder. And all the more truly.
Luke Cage is a better Superman than Superman is in the movies
right now
for that reason, because he's able to acknowledge the darkness and the flaws and the frailties and the problems in the world without letting them destroy him or force him to make really terrible decisions all the time. And ultimately, he does preach hope, and people around him are inspired by it. And that's something we missed from all the other Superman movies we have right now. Although I haven't seen Supergirl yet. I hear it's really good. The new season with Superman.
Oh, I haven't watched it.
I've seen the first season. It's great.
Okay. So what do we think season 2 is going to portend?
I saw that Diamondback thing, and I was just like, fuck my life. I don't want to see him again.
We're done.
I know. Like the least interesting character of this whole thing is coming back with powers next season. Yippee.
Well, I don't know. For me, the show, the second half, the bottom half really let me down. I loved it through episode 7, episode 8. That's not even half, by the way. I messed that up.
A little over half.
About 2/3.
But it was the end of it just drove me crazy with the choices that were made, how slow it was, how corny it got, how it bothered me because I feel like it's got a finger on the pulse, but I just can't grab on to these really important issues. And I would rate the bottom half of this series or season 1 as like the worst among the Netflix Marvel pantheon.
Are we including like the second half of Daredevil season 2? Because I think that's way worse.
I think that one is like second worst.
Because here's the thing with Daredevil season 2, it got disjointed. It really lost the emotional thread.
It made a lot of mistakes.
And here, at the very least, the tone was consistent. The characters, except for Diamondback, who just is not an interesting character, the characters were consistent and they evolved in ways that I believed. So I'm going to give it definitely more of a higher rating than that.
I just don't think it was there. I also didn't like the idea of Shades Mariah as like a couple or like ruling together as king and queen. He is not on her level. He is not, and he's not the kind of villain that she.
But weirdly, he's her Lady Macbeth. You know, he's the nudger. He's the one kind of pushing her stuff.
He's worm tongue. He's sitting there behind the throne. Yes,
exactly. And I like that we have a Basquiat painting in there now. That was kind of great.
That was fun.
All right, we are out of time, but this is, I think, a show that we're going to be talking about, and certainly when season 2 rolls around, there'll be more to think about. So in the meantime, let us know what you thought in the comments, and thanks for joining us.